All right, welcome. Here is my boy Vinny.
Well, here we are at Why I Rise, and we have a great guest this show. It's Dr. Stan Goldberg. He is an expert in speech therapy. He is a published writer, and most recently, he is a person with Parkinson's. And to kick it off, Dr. Stan, would you mind walking us through your sort of unusual diagnosis process that happened to you?
Yeah, when I was in graduate school, I started having sleep problems. And at that time, we're talking maybe 50 years back because I'm going to be 80 April 5th.
Wow.
So
So let me just stop you. So you're saying at 30 years old.
yeah, yeah, at 30, I had a lot of sleep issues, and they didn't quite know what it was and what to call it. Uh, but that persisted for quite a while. When they eventually did understand what it was, I had gone for many years without adequate sleep, and it got so bad that when I was teaching, I went in one day. This was a 3 hour seminar, and I came back out after the seminar. My graduate student came in, and she looked very upset, and I assumed I did something wrong during the lecture. And I said, what's wrong?" He said, "Well, everything was fine in the lecture. You didn't say anything that upset anybody. But the problem was you gave the exact same lecture you gave last week,
Oh, wow.
almost word for word."
Wow.
And the graduate student didn't stop you?
No. No, he was a graduate student. You're not supposed to do that with a professor.
Oh.
So it became really apparent to me that that whatever was going on was severely impacting my ability to teach. And I retired at the end of that year. So that was what, 50, I was 56 when I retired. And again, it's still at that time, nobody really said you have Parkinson's. And as I started to accumulate various symptoms, I realized something was going on here. This wasn't just random events. And it wasn't until 3 years ago that a neurologist at UC San Francisco realized what was happening and made the diagnosis. So that's when I started investigating what was happening to my body.
So, okay, go ahead, Vin.
No, you go.
I was going to say, I mean, a couple of things stuck out in my head. 30, is Michael J. Fox being diagnosed as Jennifer Parkinson, who has the last name as a disease, but is not related to the disease, but has it. She, she was, I think, 29, and these are people that I've met. I'm only a dozen years into it now, but I think about 30, and you're not able to get into sleep, and that's when most of us would sleep for 12, 15 hours on a Saturday, and so did they take it back to like when you were 30 and say that's really where it started for you, or is it the Parkinson's came in after this the sleep disorder?
Well, it's called a REM sleep disorder. So it's rapid eye movement sleep disorder. And for some of the people who are listening, they may not know what that is. And the body goes through different stages in the sleep process. And during one of these, where you act out your dreams, your body is basically paralyzed, and it can't move. Well, if you have the REM sleep disorder, you're not your body is not paralyzed, and as a result, you thrash. I would fall out of the bed quite often, and eventually, and my wife was taking some blood thinners, so I couldn't sleep in the same bed because I was afraid of hitting her. So 65% of the people who have a REM sleep disorder eventually develop Parkinson's.
Wow.
But that I didn't know until 3 years ago.
Right. I didn't know until now.
Well, and that's the funny thing is I didn't know it either, but I took a ride last week, a week ago from Saturday with the Southern California Parkinson's Riders, and they do a charity event that comes out on is a ride in Irvine. It's like a 70-mile ride, then there's like a 8-mile ride, which is fine for me. But the guy said to me, there's this guy that was with us, and I couldn't figure out. I'm like, is it him that has the Parkinson's or is his wife? Because neither one of them looked like they had Parkinson's.
Mhm.
And the guy that was organizing it pulled me aside and said he has this REM sleep thing. I mean, the guy was I mean, I would have never assumed that he had. I mean, would have been the last person if he had lined him up. But he said, yeah, he's basically, I guess the word would be guaranteed, use that loosely, to get Parkinson's once you've been diagnosed with this particular disorder.
Wow.
Yeah, well, usually when you do have the REM sleep disorder, I mean, there's people who have it without any associated symptoms of Parkinson's, and then there's other people like myself where that's just one of many different symptoms. What people usually look for when they know that I have Parkinson's is tremor. I've never had tremor. The only time it approaches any kind of tremor is when I am extremely tired, when my muscles are fatigued. But other than that, I have no tremor. I do have instability. And you're mentioning, bike riding. I love to ride bikes, and I had to stop doing that just because of my balance. And there's many other things. So balance, uh, constipation, indigestion, sleep disorders, all of those were sort of coming together without anybody saying, "Hey, you may have Parkinson's." And as I looked into the literature, I realized, yeah, these are all related. And even though I don't have tremor, I know the direction my body is going.
Well, I thought about when we spoke of that, and you talked about balance because I was saying that I ride and I'm okay. I was thinking if we could get you a sidecar and get Vinny in the sidecar with some goggles and a scarf and maybe a pith helmet, then you could ride on the 26th down in Irvine with Vinny as your sidekick.
Or you can just get me a tricycle,
Yeah,
for an old person.
but you'll probably have to start like 3 hours ahead of everybody.
Well, see, it's fun that we're joking around this because really what brought the three of us together was, of course, everybody wants a cure, and we hope, we certainly hope one comes. No one doesn't want a cure, but we talk about, how to live your best day today.
Mhm.
And rather than talk, and that's why things like this, like how do you solve the bike riding problem, even if we're being ridiculous, but this is where we like to approach what goes on with Parkinson's, and laugh a little bit about it, and just try to talk about the grassroots stuff, the day to day. I have a question. I hope I'm not blindsiding you, Dr. Stan, but
No.
I know you did something on preventing senior moments.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, for my own sake, get a little selfish here. What were you able to distinguish what was truly a senior moment, or if it was something worse? Because that's what I worry about when I walk in and I go, why did I walk in this room? I go, well, everybody says they do that, but is there something more wrong with me?
Yeah. So I'll do the quick plug first. I did write a book called Preventing Senior Moments, How to Stay Alert Until Your 90s and Beyond, and you can order it at Amazon. But what I was concerned about was, and it was actually partially related to what I was experiencing because of the Parkinson's, which was my focus was deteriorating. It took me longer to write articles.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
and there was the other things associated with that. And my concern was, am I just getting old? Well, yes, I'm getting old, but is it just aging, or was there something else? Was there dementia involved? And so as I started doing research, I realized that most of it had to do with just, certain things that are associated with aging. our brains do not function as they did when we were younger. That's just a matter of fact. It doesn't mean that, that we're losing our marbles. It just means that we need to make some adjustments. And a lot of those adjustments involve the use of what I call compensatory strategies. These are things that to get us through. So the best example I give is, you've got two cars that are driving cross country. One is a brand new Cadillac, and the other is a 1956 Chevy. So, they're not going to, encounter the same problems going across country. You need to do some extra things for your Chevy. And that's what aging to me is all about, is can we come up with compensatory strategies to make that journey a little bit easier? And I'm actually applying most of those same strategies to Parkinson's.
Great.
And
Yeah.
they worked fairly well that way. So I've come to Parkinson's not a neophyte. What,
Right.
what I've come with are sets of strategies that are helping me adjust.
And that just brings it back to your own your own thesis, which is, how do we do this? We become our own scientists.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and figuring out the best way, Jam, we were talking about, balance problems and practicing going from room to room so that you don't end up in a shuffle and
Right.
stuff like that. And actually, caregiving yourself, being kind to yourself, know what's going on and try to do your best to live with them and live a great day today.
Well, Stan and I were talking, at the end of the session, and we talked about the idea of, everything from neuroplasticity down to, just like telling yourself, walk heel toe, walk heel toe. But I said that to Heidi, she was asking me about, this next podcast, and Heidi's my wife, for those of you that are joining us on the first visit, and I will talk a lot about her, much to her chagrin. But she said, she just started to pay attention to me, and it was like she started going, all right, heel toe, and then it was up straight, head up, look up at the sky, don't look at, and it was like all of a sudden I'm like, I'm doing all these things wrong, or there's a deficiency in the way that I do them, or they're not as polished as they used to be. But just the idea, which I'm sure many Parkinson's folks could tell you, is when you're going downhill, I mean, I'm talking about like a 0.002 grade. We're not talking about like up a cliff. When you're going downhill, there's no problem. When you're going up that the opposite side of that, it's like you're hitting your shoe into that cement and settling it all the way, rather than coming down. I don't know if I can see this.
Yeah,
Down and landing and then coming up and then going forward again. And I quoted a guy by the name of John Pepper that said, I think he said, I don't know medically if this is accurate, but there's 14 actual movements to take one step. Does that sound right, Stan?
Yep.
wow.
I saw 15, but yeah. And actually that's a really good point. I think that, and again, and I may just be overgeneralizing because I've only had this, at least been diagnosed for 3 years. But what I've found is that most people who have Parkinson's really don't understand, behaviorally what's happening between what they want to do and what they're able to do. When you ask someone about Parkinson's, they will often give you the medical explanation, which is wonderful. But as a speech language pathologist, what I did for 30 years was I tried to solve problems, communication problems. And for me, what I always wanted to do was to sort of analyze the situation, figure out what the cause was, and then how to correct it. If you think in those terms, when I look at Parkinson's, what I see is The brain has a message that it wants to send to a muscle or a series of muscles to do something. And the muscles aren't getting that correct message. It's being disrupted in some way. So, if I want to stand up and just be straight, I want to have my body, balance itself out. Well, my body sometimes acts like a willful teenager, and it doesn't want to listen to what I want. So it'll do whatever it wants. So the question then becomes, can I use that analogy in some way to understand not only what's happening with my Parkinson's, but also how I can control it? And the answer is yes. And you mentioned that Heidi told you, think about heel toe, heel toe. That's critical, because what you're doing, there's two Buddhist concepts that I think are important for Parkinson's, and no one really talks about them. The first is mindfulness. Mindfulness, just really basically, without getting into any spiritual jargon, is focusing in on the present, what you're doing as you're doing it. If you look at the development of any behavior, it all the correct or the most appropriate behaviors for that are doing the exact same, not the well. Let me rephrase that. What you want to do is you want to do the most perfect example of a behavior. Good example is the Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps.
Right.
His trainer would allow him to be in the pool and practice as long as his form was absolutely perfect. When it deviated at all, he pulled him out of the pool. And his explanation was, I don't want him to practice something that's not perfect, because that'll then become part of his routine.
Mm-hmm.
Back to Parkinson's. If we look at what we're doing in Parkinson's, we are trying to fix a problem after it's occurred. It's almost as if, you can definitely close that door after the barn door after the horse leaves, but it's gone. It's the same thing in Parkinson's. What I think what we need to do is first understand how we make our muscles move. We do that by sending signals to the body to do certain things. 60% of all of the behaviors we do are automatic. And what that means essentially is, in the past, we have started a behavior, we've worked on it, we've done it so many times that all we need to do is to initiate the first part of it, and everything else goes. It's like a series of dominoes. Okay. And if you watch a child learning how to walk, that's what he does. He will get up and he will try to walk, and he will maybe fall down. He'll get up, he'll practice it. Okay. If in fact that happens and he gets it mastered, it becomes an automatic behavior. It's a sequence of events. Like you said, walking involves 14, 15 different steps. That's all what the brain does. The brain wants to be efficient. So it doesn't necessarily try to think about all of those different things. He creates a series, an automatic series, and it does it. So what I think is happening is, if we want to control or modify our behaviors that are already defective, the easiest thing to do is think about how that behavior was originally learned. And what we then want to do is focus on practicing that. I'll give you a very good example. I had a problem with scuffing my toe when I was running. And I could have stopped running, or I could have said, okay, let me see if all of these fine ideas I have actually work. And what I did was I started focusing on what's involved in running and doing it, enough time so I had a fairly good idea what I needed to do not to scuff my toe and trip and fall down. The second part of that is repetition, that nothing becomes automatic unless it is practiced forever. So I started doing that. I took the components of running, and I still have a 4 mile course that I run and 13,000 steps in that. So I am now practicing 13,000 times in an hour. Okay. Uh, I don't scuff my toe anymore. And what I've done is I combined the two things, taking, a behavior, a simple behavior, understanding it and practicing it, and putting that in the framework of being my own scientist and saying, okay, what am I looking at? Does this work? If it doesn't, what can I do differently? And I think that's the model that I think I would love for people with Parkinson's to try to
Hey,
see if it works.
I would think that anyone watching us right now um, gets a little comfort out of somebody else saying, taking it apart, because you're right. I don't think a lot of people who have it don't really know all the details of it. And
Oh,
when I talk to Jam gets surprised fairly frequently, right?
with what?
That you still discover things. Uh,
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's whether you're going in or whether you're going out of life, it's all moments of discovery. It's all, there's, but the where I want to take us back to was Dr. Stan's comment about a baby, a child learning how to walk. Now, there's no way to know this because we don't have anybody that speaks fluent baby and or can understand all this behavioral stuff. But I think when if you take whatever day one, and you don't know how to walk, and then through watching people, through moving around, crawling, all these kinds of things, you learn more and more behaviors. Your body remembers them and can put them into function. Now you can reach, and now you know what you're reaching for. But I think the interesting thing is when you ask somebody to do it like, as Stan, you're 80 or going to be 80. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of years. To me, you make it to 80, it's like you get a pass. You're like, yeah, you take this wherever you go. You've made it to the holy grail. Go, enjoy what's left of your life on us. But what's interesting is I don't think children, infants, babies have shame, have guilt, have fear to the degree that I do when I sit down and go, I can't fucking walk anymore. What the fuck is this? And I go through this anger. So then Heidi has to talk me down from the anger. So that's the first phase. Then she's got to say, you got to do this, you got to do that. And that's the second phase. Then I got to go out and do it. And it's like I go back to zero because now I'm in my head. I think that what has happened to us is that once it got in here, there was a value put to it. And that
uh,
value is if you can't do something, well, then you're this valuable to society, and this valuable, and this valuable. Because this disease, what I do know it does is it takes people out of the game. And one of the things I say is stay in the game. It's like somebody once said to me, if you're in France and you're in Paris and you're at the L'Arc de Triomphe, just keep going around. Eventually you'll get out of the circle of cars that pin somebody into the middle, somebody's trying to get over. But the idea is that I think we have really put, especially to this disease or ones that are neurological, where it's a lot harder for, I think, the medical community to really understand what they know or, expound on what they do know already. And is that we have a series of emotions that come with us. And they're in the soil when we're infants. It's not like it pops in at 13, but the value of not being able to master something when you realize that somebody said that to you, it's like, you know, I thought about it, but my brain went out. I think if I wrote it down, but you know, it's like if you were doing something, not harming anybody, but you were doing something. I mean, I can share kind of a off the mind. Well, I'll save it for later. But let's say you're doing something, and then all of a sudden your parents go, you're not supposed to do that, and you're like, well, why? I enjoy it. I feel good doing it. I'm not bothering anybody. Well, the Catholic Church frowns upon that kind of behavior. Now all of a sudden there's a pound of guilt that was just dumped into your lap, and I think that's like, and I'm not shooting down what you're saying. I think you're spot on. I think is, how do we get this anxiety and this fear and this stress that people have, when instead of, they should have joy. Like if you said, hey, I guarantee you by the end of this afternoon you'll be walking normally. That's People would just jump up out of their wheelchairs and go, I don't know who you are, Messiah, but I'll take that shot, because nothing else I'm doing works.
Well, I agree with you, by the way, completely. The whole notion of guilt, but I don't think we need to go back to what our parents may or may not have done to us to instill guilt. I think a lot of it has to do with the approach of many therapists. There's a distinction in therapy between what and how. Most therapists will lay out what you should do to get to a certain place. What is less focused, or less emphasized, is how you get there. I'll give a very good example. I had a friend of mine. Unfortunately, she recently died. She had Parkinson's. And she was going to a physical therapist. And the physical therapist, emphasized to her the what portion of exercise. You need to exercise because, all of this shows that it will have a definite benefit, and which is true. But now, how do you get someone who hasn't done any exercise from the point of just sitting in a chair to actually doing a significant amount of movement to affect the behavior, to affect Parkinson's? Well, that was the missing part. And if you look at most therapeutic interventions, most of them are they involve what statements, not how. So if I tell you, you should be doing so much exercise a week, and you don't do it, and you feel guilty about it, it's not your failure. It's my failure as a therapist, because I have not structured the intervention program sufficiently well enough that you can succeed. There's a thing called successive approximations, which basically says, if you want to accomplish something, you do it in tiny little steps. And each step is so small that you can succeed, continually. I think that's one way of looking at the guilt that we all feel for not being able to perform as much as we'd like to. But it's not our fault. It's the fault of the therapists.
Right. But to a certain degree, and I totally understand what you're saying, and I didn't know that any therapist took the blame for not helping somebody out. That's actually pretty awesome. But what I think is that we're so busy looking into all these environments that are on the outside coming in, pesticides, chemicals, things that mesothelioma, things that are asbestos, and all these things that my father's generation, he's about, I guess it could be the tail end of your generation. He's about 6 years older than you, 7 years older than you. But, that generation didn't, to the best of my knowledge, didn't speak to therapists and didn't speak to psychiatrists. And there was like, you were going to the head shrinker if you were something wrong with you, something really wrong with him. He goes to visit a psychiatrist, or he goes to a psychologist. And I mean, talk therapy to me is one of the greatest things that's ever come about. I mean, it needs to be much more. We don't need things like the pandemic to get people to go see therapists. We need people to go see therapists. Much more like it should be a well check.
Right.
You know what I mean? But the idea that we are not looking at how our emotions and stress emotions, anxiety emotions are killing us. I mean, seriously killing us. And I think it's the brain can handle what the brain can handle, but at a certain point, I don't think it's a Dow chemical as much as it is, the fact that you've got this grief or you've got this shame or guilt in your marriage or in your relationship with your children or your work relationship. And I think that that's really sort of the area that it's the tip of the iceberg. And I think if you can, people say, oh, meditate. And I know plenty of people meditate, and I've meditated before myself. It's a hard focus. It's a hard discipline. It's not easy to get to a certain point, or you can get to a certain point that it's really more difficult to get up to the next level. So I mean, that's why I think like the idea is that human beings, you see a therapist, you see a psychiatrist, they help you in that moment. You're in that moment with them. And then you hopefully take something with it and practice it when you get out into the world.
Exactly.
But I think that the other half of we were talking about mindfulness, and we were talking about the behavior and all those things that we learned when we were kids, is think about as a child, on average, has more people around it when it's very small than when it gets to a certain age, when you're deemed you're on your own, when you're kicked to the curb, you got to leave the herd kind of thing. But I mean, it's like children are constantly having people they don't even know reaching in. Can I touch your baby? Or the mom, can I put my hand on your belly? I know you're, Heidi and I, when our first daughter was born, Claire, she was born at Cedars, and she woke me up at like, I don't know, 8 o'clock in the morning and said, I'm having contractions. And I said, jump up. And, like every sitcom, I got to get the bag. I bang my head on the door, fall down, Keystone cops it. And then I get her. And she goes, no, it's okay. I just want to let you know, just go back to sleep. And I'm like, okay. So I went back to sleep, and that was like deep REM sleep. I mean, I was like gone. She woke me up. We go to the hospital, that waiting in the trauma unit or whatever, the emergency room, and our nurse comes in. Now our nurse walks down the hallway. Heidi's anxious, anxiety, doesn't know if she's going to do the epidural, up until that point. And our nurse comes in, and I could physically see her stress level start to come down like this, because this is a lady who took us through Lamaze. And so Heidi was comfortable. And she said, baby, you're not ready to go. You're only like 3 centimeters or whatever, halfway there. And she said, you got to go walk around the mall. And so I take her around the mall, and I'm bored to tears out because I'm like on stress level DEFCON 5. So I'm like, I've got shit planned. I've got moments. I can't even think about this moment because I got 10 moments down the road as to who I got to call, what do I got to do. I'm going to do my job. And we walked into, she goes, do you need anything? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, she goes, well, while we're here, do you need anything for shopping? Because she could tell that I was just, so here's a lady who's in labor and is her first birth. And she's paying attention to her number one baby, who thinks he needs a pair of high top tennis shoes, so we go and buy the high top tennis shoes, and Heidi brings her belly and kind of just like sets it on the counter, because, she's just huge. And the girl behind the counter goes, oh my God, can I touch your belly? And Heidi goes like, sure. And she touches her belly. She's kind of like holding her hand there. And she says, how far along are you? She goes, I'm in labor right now. And this girl pulled her hand back like she had just put it in fire. And was just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. So then Heidi's like, it's totally cool. It's totally cool. I'm at this thing. I need to get this. So we're walking on the mall. So where do we go next? Do you guys probably remember this story, but the younger people watching this probably won't. Z Gallery.
Oh, right.
Like every couch in there was felt or like purple and green, and just very like, magical mystery tour kind of stuff. And she sits down on an $8,000 couch, and I'm like looking around, and we're talking. She goes, JM, come here. Oh yeah. She goes, I think my water broke. I'm all, we just bought an $8,000 couch. So she gets up, and we just kind of beelined out there, but thankfully she hadn't. But I'm talking about like the stress, like the doctors, there's been, I'm sure you are aware of these studies, there's been plenty of studies of when women that are giving birth don't have their regular doctor, their stress level is through the roof. And when Nancy, Heidi's gynecologist, OBGYN, came in, and she was out to dinner at like, I don't know, Hard Rock Cafe or Planet Hollywood, one of these places in Hollywood, in Beverly Hills. And she walked in, Heidi, I could see the monitor, the blood pressure go down.
Wow.
And I think that that is something that is not, that should be in the priority of where we are, is that we should be preparing people to go out into the world, to not face the world to make money, but to realize that the world is going to come at them any way it does. And it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. I think you said that the last time we talked, Stan. Am I correct? Or is it somebody else?
I think it was me, but
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Take all the good credit to go for it, man. I mean, I'm here to support you.
I think there's different ways in which people can deal with the anxiety they have about Parkinson's, about what they can do, what has been lost. And I think talk therapy is very appropriate for some people. Um, but and some of my best friends are psychologists. But I think that there's the behavioral approach, which is one that again I prefer because one is I find it to be more effective and quicker. And I mean, I'll give you an example. I had a friend of mine who was very anxious about being able to walk in public without appearing to be intoxicated.
Yep.
And he was, it was very, very anxious about, very upset about that. And we could have done some counseling, but I said to him, but what if I showed you how to walk where you wouldn't appear that way? Should we try that? And we did. So what I did was we used some strategies. Now granted, he wasn't walking as fast as he normally did, but we did certain things, about one was looking at how he was walking, slowing it down. And so in a period of like 30 minutes of walking, now I'm not saying this was a permanent cure, but at that point, he was able to walk without appearing as he thought was drunk. So this was 30 minutes and he changed his attitude, reduced his stress, not through talk, but through action. And
Right.
I think that's a component that I find missing when people with Parkinson's are provided with suggestions or protocols for changing their behaviors. Those protocols are inadequate. And usually the reason they're inadequate is they're not based on how the brain forms memories. They don't take the behavior and reinforce it to the point where it becomes automatic again. So yeah, I mean, I fully endorse counseling for attitude, but we need to also couple that with better behavioral intervention. And I just don't see that happening. There's different ways of treating the symptoms of Parkinson's. Some of them are best addressed, like stress, with talk therapy. Others require more, direct behavioral intervention. Um, I think that that's one part that's missing in a lot of approaches to Parkinson's. And when a behavioral approach is taken, it's inadequate. If you're going to change behaviors, you need to have people focusing in on the elements of that behavior, and it needs to be done in a way that is easy to be successful and repetitive. That to me is the magic, elixir for taking some of the symptoms and changing them.
And I agree, and that goes all into why I rise. It's all about making today a better day. Just living in the moment, as you both talk about, and I agree with it. And I'm just really happy we had you on. Jam, anything else?
Well, yeah, there's a lot else. I think what we really need to do is make this a part 1 or 2, or maybe even 3, depending on how far we go.
I agree.
I think, Stan, I'm just, I think we are kindred spirits in the sense that, correct me if I'm wrong, you've been diagnosed 3 years and you're not taking meds.
No,
And that I think is bravo. I mean, I think that is one thing I might have second guessed myself when I was diagnosed with it, but I just was so agitated by the way my leg felt, kind of like, I don't want to say dragging, but kind of felt like it was numb, or I couldn't get, that's where it all started, was at my right hip and thigh. But I definitely think that, things that are talked about but yet seem to all be the first ones that fail are community groups, outreach groups, where people can go and be around other people. Sometimes it's scary. I mean, when I was diagnosed, I was 46 years old, and the doctor at UCLA said, this is what I recommend you do. Go exercise. What kind of exercise? Whatever you want. Okay, let me rephrase that. What kind of exercise is best to battle Parkinson's? Well, boxing, Tai Chi, cycling. But I'm not going to tell you what to do. You got to do the one you like. And young onset Parkinson's groups, don't go. You'll see these guys, like this, and and that kind of stuff. And I said, well, look, if that's where I'm eventually headed, don't know, but I should know what might be on the road ahead of me. So
absolutely.
that idea of community, I think, is one of the things that needs to be really like kicked into high gear. And
Yeah.
almost everything you were saying, Stan, when you were talking about mindfulness and you were talking about behaviors, and we were talking, is that almost stroke, Parkinson's, MS, all are things that could, and then human beings can all benefit from this kind of theories behind the mechanisms of the body, which the brain takes care of on a daily basis, but also the advice for somebody who has Parkinson's can be the same for somebody who has MS or has a stroke.
Yeah. Let me give a plug to one community group out here on the West Coast. In Berkeley, there's a group called Ph.D Active, and it is a comprehensive approach to Parkinson's. They have Zoom groups, they have discussion groups, they have exercise groups. And I mean, I look at that as a model of how I think most support groups should be. So just a plug for them.
No, and we want to do me a favor, say the title of your book again.
It's called Preventing Senior Moments. How to stay alert into your 90s and beyond. Now, you probably can't, that's just a little one here.
Okay.
That's the cover.
So I was wrong. It's not Preventing Senior Moments, the life story of Vinny DiGiulio. That's not the case.
It's not the case.
The next one will be.
Have them. No,
so I'm going to write it. I'm going to write it on the back of a matchbook. Just a little pamphlet. It's. But I definitely want to get you back here. I want to talk about a lot of things, but I just think that it's awesome that you're addressing this. I know you had other health issues that are equally, I don't want to use the word dangerous, but people have not succeeded the way you have, and so I think that the more folks that can talk about it and talk openly about it. And again, I don't really like this podcast to become like, then there's the drooling, and it's like everybody's just like, oh fuck, why do I live? Look where I'm going. Well, and, things that you touched upon, just things we can versus what we can't do, or like I like to say, stay in the game. It's one of those things where if you're around something long enough, eventually somebody goes, hey, you come over, we need some help. And then you're in the show.
I mean, I've spent my professional career solving problems. I would love to be able to, let's say, if you want to have a segment where we take a specific problem pertaining to Parkinson's, and we figure out a way of, if not solving it, at least bridling it. So that would be, very To me, that would be very significant.
Let's do
Well,
it.
you guys actually did it today with running. I mean, with the heel to toe stuff. I mean, you know, I'm thinking that people are out there watching this because it's not about how bad things are. It's about how to make everything better. And Stan, I really applaud the power of your brain and what it's able to do. And I just hope you can just spread that knowledge and how to turn your brain towards the problem in the moment. Rehearse all the things you said. Just makes so much sense, but somebody has to say them first.
Okay, name the movie. That's what we'll do this one. Here's a teaser. What was the name on the brain? Abby something. Abby what? Abby normal.
Stein.
Yeah. You got me an abnormal brain?
Well, here's to making them normal again.
Yes. Well, thank you, boys. Have a great night.